welcome back. For those who are just joining us, you're right in time for press review. But before we can take a look at what's making headlines on the local dailies, allow me to introduce the individual who will be helping us understand what's currently happening within the country, within the law aspect. And sitting closer to me, I have Maura Kabata. He is an advocate. Good morning, Kabata. Thank you so much for your time.
Good morning.
Before we can get into this, let us jump, and I would love for you to help myself and also Kenyans understand what's happening around. And when I mean happening around is Tom Ojienda's arrest, as well as Mr. Peter Wanyama, who were arrested on Friday. But as of, I want to believe, a few hours ago, he was released. Has he been released, or are those just rumors?
The good professor of law has been released.
He's officially been released?
Yes, from the Directorate of Criminal Investigations.
Okay.
Last night, perhaps at 10. That is the position, yes. It is not a rumor.
But why would he be released at night? And what were the terms of that release?
The terms of the release themselves as to the way forward is that he will be appearing today in court.
Right.
The time of which I am not aware of. But today, early this morning, he will be appearing in court. Yes.
And why 10 p.m.? Why would it release at 10 p.m.? And would this still same work for a common Kenyan?
That administrative, I want to call it an anomaly, is what I and many others, including yourselves, do not understand.
Yes.
Because he was arrested on Friday, perhaps at 1, and released yesterday at 10 p.m. Now, all that time, perhaps the detectives at DCI will want to say that they were conducting investigations, but my opinion is before you arrest someone, then you ought to have concerned yourselves with the investigative part of it. Right. Not after arresting, then continuing the investigation.
Right. And we'll talk about that, the police arrest and the search warrants. But before we get to that, there's this term that legal fraternity likes to use, presumption of innocence until proven guilty. What is that? Help us understand the context of that sentence.
The context of that right in itself, I am referring to it as a right because it finds constitutional homage. Okay. This means that it is, in fact, a right within the constitution of an arrested person and a person who is now a suspect. This means that it is so sacred that before you go before a judicial forum to articulate the issues before that you are being charged with allegedly, then the judicial platform itself needs to sort of clear its mind of any element of guilt. That is why it is safe then to presume, and this applies to anyone.
It's a constitutional right.
It is a constitutional right. Over and above being a constitutional right, it is a human right. Right. So it finds placement within the Constitution that harmonizes it as a constitutional right, but also fundamentally as a human right. That without it, that platform that you're calling a judicial platform will not attain an element of fairness because someone is alleging that you have done something. Now, for a judicial platform, a judge or a magistrate, they need to clear their mind of that guilt to start from a safe point and say that then you are innocent. Now, whoever is alleging then needs to prove that you are not innocent, thus guilty. Of course, through facts and evidence. Yes.
Okay. Now let's come back to what you had mentioned earlier, the whole police arrest and search warrants. In the absence of one person whose rights are being violated, in this case, it was Tom Ojienda.
Yes.
Help us understand the aspect. And first of all, is it a constitutional, are you violating one's right, constitutional right, when a police search and a search warrant is conducted when the individual is absent?
In fact, yes. Some of these issues can be clarified through an engagement.
Right.
You ask and then it is perhaps minimalized. You ask me something and then I explain it to you. Instead of taking me through a process and then finally telling me we are very sorry, but we did a mistake. Some things can be explained out. And I am speaking this way because I do not want to touch into the cogent substantive elements of this case because it is before court, but it is thoroughly unfair to investigate someone without involving them, because some of these issues then go to a pertinent dimension as to the identity of the person. In this case, let us use Professor Ojienda, and this is something that is cardinal to those who believe in the rule of law, that he is not only a professor of law, he is a senior counsel. Furthermore, he is the male representative, the LSK male representative to the JSC. This is a constitutional commission, an independent commission. Now, if there is something that the police want to investigate him in, then it is just right that they ask him those questions or that query that they have. As we had seen perhaps in the case of his colleague, Mr. Wanyama,
right,
that they ought to clarify and then tell you, perhaps we are very sorry for wasting your day, but we have now clarified with you, or tell you, you have not substantively responded to our query, and we think we need to undertake more investigation.
And that wasn't the case for Professor?
That was not the case for Professor.
Okay, and away from the title, away from this case,
yes,
away from his titles,
yes,
for a common Kenyan,
yes,
that means Kenyans should be well aware, yes, that a search warrant should not happen if you are not physically present, be it in your office, your place of work, yes, or your home.
Yes, because fundamentally, this does not apply only to professors of law.
Right.
Neither does it apply to ambassadors or persons of high office. No, it applies to everyone. In fact, the Constitution refers it to persons, all persons. Now, all persons does not exclude me or you,
right,
or, you know, Mama
right,
Mboga,
right,
or a boda boda guy. No, it is inclusively of everyone. In fact, in this very case, a search warrant can be issued, yes, and I agree, but it is of cardinal importance for a spectacular reason, that the sacred nature that perhaps you as my client would have with me as an advocate, that you would want to be confident enough to know that anything that you share with me remains private and confidential, isn't it? Now imagine a situation where you believe that perhaps some information that I possess on your behalf is then being accessed, not only pursuant to, let's say, a court order or a search being conducted, whether procedurally or not, by the police. How will it make you feel? How would the trust relationship between yourself and me as an advocate then be displayed or identified?
Right.
You understand?
Right.
Yes.
And police arrest in Kenya,
yes,
do at least police do what you talked about? Do they at least read for you your rights before they handcuff you? There's a certain procedure that is done out of human dignity.
Yes.
Is that the same case here in Kenya? Instead of just police abruptly coming to where you are and arresting you, isn't there not a certain procedure? They read to you your rights, etc.
In fact, you put it so well. You mentioned a term, human dignity.
Okay.
Now, human dignity also is a constitutional right over and above being a sacred human right.
Okay.
So each and every arrest, let us call it a search, then has to confirm or conform with these constitutional edicts. What am I saying with this? That even if you are a suspect or an arrested person, you need to be afforded, even to the least, a minimum guarantee of human dignity. If a police officer came to you and told you, my sister, I am conducting an investigation in which you are an interested person, and I want you to assist, or I am now taking you into custody because I believe that you will aid in my investigation, perhaps being under arrest. As a law-abiding citizen, you tell them, oh, very well, identify yourself, and after they have identified themselves, then you say, very well, let me make a call. To whom? Perhaps your lawyer or your family or your clergy member. You know, right, someone else to know that someone has taken possession of you. Why is this very important? We have had several cases, this is on fact, it's a record, I am not alleging, that persons have disappeared after being arrested by the police. So it needs a backing.
Right.
Now the law has seen that an arrested person or a person who is suspected then has to undergo a minimum right that someone else needs to know they have been arrested. So the arrest process has to take fact of that. One, you will need counsel, perhaps legal representation. Number two, you will need, as of that very moment, a right to be informed why you are being arrested.
Right.
Arrested.
Right.
And there is a difference between being arrested and being detained. Yes, these are fundamental opposites.
Help us understand.
Being detained then, being arrested is not a violation of a right.
Okay.
You have a right to liberty, isn't it?
Yes.
That you wake up in the morning and come to the KTN studios or go and, enjoy the luxuries of being in Nairobi.
Right.
But when you are arrested, you cannot enjoy those rights. Now, the law as it is, the Constitution, then allows for an arrest, because we must have some form of decency and order. And in this arrest, then what should happen is a police ought to identify himself or herself and then tell you the minimal rights that you have in terms of that arrest. At least tell you that you have a right not to tell me anything, that I, police officer of this and this rank or number, this and this, station at this police, I am now taking you into my custody because you are of importance in my investigation, or I believe you must answer to some,
right.
Yes, to some charges.
Right. So, Kabata, once one is arrested,
yes.
What rights do they lose?
In fact, the only right they lose is their liberty at that very moment.
Okay.
Yes, because now you can't go anywhere. You have to confine yourself with this person who is arresting you. But all other rights then remain intact.
Should your rights be violated,
yes.
What option does a Kenyan, what option do I have
yes.
in terms of what legal action do I take? Am I allowed to sue if my rights are violated? Help me go.
In fact, various, that's a good question you pose, and many Kenyans perhaps may not be alive to this.
Yes.
But fundamentally, a police officer arresting you, including an officer commanding a station, including an OCPD or to any rank, is confined by law to afford you these rights, failure of which then it is right to say that your rights have been trampled upon. Now, what happens after that? This is not limited again to persons holding high office.
Right.
It extends to every Kenyan. In fact, it is not every Kenyan. It is every person. Because then the Constitution does not limit it to Kenyans alone.
Citizenship, right.
Citizenship alone.
Right.
It extends to other people who find home in Kenya. So it says after that violation has occurred, as you put it, then it is someone else who would pay for violating it. And this case in point, some judicial officers have seen the mischief in allowing the state to compensate and say that the state will not compensate, that it is the individual officer or individual person who violated your rights who will pay, whether they are state officers or whether they are private individuals. For instance, if I am here at KTN and you refuse me to leave, you see you have detained me. So my liberty then has been curtailed, isn't it?
Right.
So this is not the state, this is a private company.
Yes, so it's the company then to pay you, not the state.
Yes. Of course, yes.
Okay,
of
all
course,
right,
yes.
Very well understood. Now that I have you here as an advocate, the other thing that this specific case for Tom Ojienda has brought, which we will not go to because it's in court, as you've said, but there's a lot of conversation that Friday's arrests should stop. Yet we've seen in the course of the year a lot of the Friday's arrests happening to individuals who are prompted out of a specific corruption case. But let me take you through memory lane.
Yes.
Some of the corruption cases that we've had in 2018, and even for our viewers, just a quick reminder. The maize scandal, which was estimated that we lost about 5.6 billion Kenyan shillings. The NHIF scam, which still continues. We've lost so far about 1.5 billion Kenyan shillings. These are just the numbers that we know. And the Kenya Power, the top executives from this specific firm that were facing theft charges relating to faulty equipment, investigators had put about 400 million Kenyan shillings that was lost through that. The Kenya Pipeline, which is listed as one of the co-conspirators, to be specific, the senior individuals have been listed as the co-conspirators in development of a 2 billion petroleum jetty in Kisumu. And then, of course, the SGR compensation. Now, Kabata, as an advocate, do you think then the Friday arrest should stop? Because the whole point of this Friday arrest is to bring about the individuals who have been mentioned within these corruption cases in their billions.
In fact, at this very moment, I would want to separate issues and say that it does not matter which regime of offenses you have been arrested over.
Okay.
In this case, I also will want to say that the Friday arrests in particular, Professor's arrests was not in relation to corruption charges.
Yes, yes,
It
yes,
is not.
yes.
It was on other offenses.
Right.
Now, there is no limitation as to when a police can arrest you or when you can be arrested. I mean, any day, depending on the administrative level or convenience of the police. But the question that begs is, why Friday?
Why not Friday?
Why not Friday? Very well. What purpose would it achieve to singularly arrest someone on a Friday? Additionally, of what value will it add to the investigating authority to arrest you on Friday? And then, spectacularly, we need then to realize that Saturday and Sundays are, of course, rest days.
Right.
This is to mean that the 24-hour period that is guaranteed to an arrested person, or a person that then has to be afforded a decent element of fair hearing, is that they have to be presented within 24 hours of their arrest. If you're arrested on Friday, this is to say in the morning, then in the afternoon you ought to be produced before a magistrate or a judge for that matter, isn't it?
But our courts that effective and fast.
In fact, if you are too, we have a spectacular case of the DCJ.
Right.
Isn't it?
Yes.
She was presented before court at 5. This is to say that the wheels of justice do not rest. You cannot say that justice operates from Monday to Friday and that Saturday and Sunday we are in a state of anarchy. No. It is a continuous process. And I am saying this, that it is not something that is outrageously illegal to arrest someone on a Friday, but it then goes to the crass of exercising judicial discretion, of exercising administrative discretion in a wrong way by the police.
Okay.
They will arrest you on Friday, do nothing with you, and then present you to a court on Monday. I have a spectacular case today morning that I am going before a magistrate on an issue that this person has not until now been afforded bail on a very simple offense. Something that you usually are given a bail term, whether free or cash or otherwise a bond, at the police station.
And Kabata, then that brings me to my next question.
Yes.
A lot of the criticism that has come behind the DCJ Mwilu, as well as even now your colleague Tom Ojienda and Peter Wanyama, is the fact that a lot of Kenyans are questioning, why is it that lawyers, advocates are so fast and so energetic when it comes to defending their own, but we are not seeing the same when it comes to Kenyans. We're not seeing the same when it comes to families that have lost their loved ones due to police brutality or other things that could be affecting a family. We do not see that same energy for Kenyans, but we see it when it's your fellow advocate or a judge.
In fact, this question ought to be posed to you, media personalities.
Okay.
It is the media that develops that hypothesis, which to me is not factual. My task as an advocate and the solemn oath that I took on my admission was to safeguard the rule of law. This does not then mean that we stick together as professional colleagues in the exclusion of all others. In fact, I will say this without fear of contradiction, that when you see such bonding of solidarity, it is usually because of friendships and a sense of camaraderie.
So then will we ever see a time, and let's give the example we were using,
Yes.
Kimani,
Yes.
The gentleman, the young gentleman who lost his life, minor.
Yes.
Would we ever see a point in time where advocates would see something like that in the news and they're angry about it and they're like, this is not right. We're supposed to be defending human rights. And this is not a person from a well-established background that they can afford, a swamp of lawyers, right? So when will we ever see that happening? Will we ever see advocates saying, you know what, let's come together and then let's fight for this individual?
The question that we need then to ask is, if this can happen to advocates, yes, then it informs how extensive it will apply to non-advocates. that if lawyers can suffer this, then, and they are then the people who are the vanguards of the rule of law, then what would happen to those who are not lawyers? And I am saying this with a lot of confidence, saying that the media then portrays these incidences as though it is lawyers saving one of their own. This is not the case.
It's not?
It is not the case,
Okay.
my sister. What happens is that immediately a lawyer is arrested. We have our own society that acts in our welfare.
Right.
So we have those communication channels that we communicate with each other and say, one of our own has been arrested. Of course, you then do not put down your tools and say, we must stop working and go and storm a police station and, you know, perhaps rescue or break out a fellow colleague. No. It is, I mean, a selected few. In fact, it even goes to friendships. That if you're not my friend, then, I mean, I will not be interested in that. But you very well capture it and say that the coming together of lawyers to sort of drive their own professional agendas in these matters, then informs perhaps if it was a non-lawyer, they will not do this. In the case of Maina, for instance, which is very sad, this was a brilliant young kid. I mean, he was on scholarships in the best Ivy League schools in the US and abroad. But his life was ended through an arbitrary act of a police officer, an excess extrajudicial killing. Now, there is a legal question that you need to answer. A person has a right to life. Now, that right to life can be limited, perhaps, through law. Through law. If it is written in law, it is written in law.
That your right to life is limited?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There's the death penalty question.
Yes,
yes.
But in this case, Maina didn't do anything to get a death penalty.
Of course, yes. I was explaining the limitation of that right.
Yes.
Now, the crass, again, individual decision that a police officer can end your life is what we need to address with so much anger and say, why would a young, promising individual lose his life over a quarrel? You understand? Then it comes into question and asks, what is the purpose of some of these independent institutions that we have? For instance, IPOA, the Independent Police Oversight Authority. What do? Leave IPOA alone. What happens to the internal affairs division of the police service, the National Police Service? How does those high-ranking officials within this service reconcile their conscience? It is a simple issue as to then, in the very instance, whether you want to commence an investigation on Friday and arrest that person on Friday, investigate. And this is one of their own. So it tells you immediately that you need something else which is outside. Whether it is a civilian police unit to watch police action, because there are so many of these cases that have gone on. There's the Willie Kimani case. There is the young baby in Kisumu. There's the young lady in Githurai who was shot. I mean, all these cases, these are 2 years plus cases, and they've never been concluded. A simple act of you are suspected of having shooting an individual. You are suspected of having clobbered a baby with a blunt object, a baby. That even that until now cannot be addressed is shocking, not to say the least.
Right.
And I am saying this again with a lot of confidence, that lawyers have taken up these cases and are prosecuting them, even with the exclusion of police action to investigate their own.
On pro bono terms?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Some of these cases will not be able to be pursued if a fee incentive will be attached to them.
Right.
No.
Right.
Yes.
Maura Kabata, thank you so much for your time.
Very well.
Thank you for helping us understand all these cases and all these terms and what it means even for a Kenyan as well. Thank you so much. Maura Kabata, he is an advocate helping us understand Tom Ojienda's arrest, and now he's officially been released. The court case, he will be in court today morning. Let's take a break and prepare for the next part of the show, so don't go too far.